Welcome, everyone. My name is Maria Barcelos. I'm the Executive Director of the Gatehouse. I'm super excited to be here today with my good friend Stefan Hordecki, who is going to be talking to us today about some research that he did on the effectiveness of the Gatehouse programs. Stefan has been a volunteer with the Gatehouse since 2011 in various roles, including group facilitator in our Phase 1 program for male survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And he's also a previous board member, acting on different committees and events. He's been part of the board for 6 years. He was on the organizing committee for our annual fundraiser, Healing the Voice Within, for the past 5 years. He is a published author and a restorative justice facilitator. He has published in the about the Gatehouse in the Internet Journal of Restorative Justice in 2020, and he's going to be sharing about that research and his findings. And he also had another article published in the Justice Report. He's taught in different courses, especially restorative justice in the criminal justice system at the University of Guelph-Humber, and has worked in the criminal justice system for more than 30 years. So I'm super excited. And I'm going to turn it over to Stefan, who's going to say a few words. And he's going to talk to us again today about the key findings and the purpose of his research about our peer support group programs at the Gatehouse. I'm going to turn it over to you, Stefan.
Thanks, Maria. As Maria said, I had an article published in the Internet Journal of Restorative Justice last year, and the title of it is, quote, "The Gatehouse, a Restorative Justice Peer Support Group Approach to Healing Childhood Sexual Trauma." And in the first part of my study, I addressed two key research questions. One, what factors are needed for healing to occur in a restorative peer support group for adult survivors of childhood sexual trauma or abuse? And secondly, is the Gatehouse Adult Phase 1 Restorative Peer Support Group Program effective in providing these factors, and therefore effective in providing healing for adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse? Briefly, regarding the methodology I used for this study, I used several actually. First, I interviewed group facilitators at the Gatehouse, including Maria Barcelos, and survivors of childhood sexual abuse who completed the Phase 1 Gatehouse program to determine the factors needed for healing to occur. As well, these interviewees provided valuable information regarding the effectiveness of the Gatehouse program in addressing these factors. Secondly, I also analyzed the Gatehouse's survivors survey responses collected from 2017 to 2020 inclusive concerning the effectiveness of the Gatehouse program in addressing survivors' needs. Here, 281 survivors participated in the survey. Thirdly, I also relied on research studies and literature on restorative justice, on peer support groups, and childhood sexual abuse as they relate to the key questions of my study. Finally, I contributed relevant observations I personally made through the lens of a group facilitator at the Gatehouse. In looking at childhood sexual abuse, it is important to define what this means. Childhood sexual abuse is the misuse of power by someone who is in authority over a child for the purpose of exploiting a child for sexual gratification. It includes incest, sexual molestation, sexual assault, and the exploitation of the child for pornography or prostitution. Victims, or survivors as they prefer to be called, of childhood sexual abuse need emotional support and often counseling or therapy to heal from the negative effects of the abuse. These negative effects include anger, depression, shame, guilt, isolation, anxiety, and poor self-esteem, and are often life-changing. Restorative justice peer support groups is one way to address these negative symptoms. In my research study, I also talk about restorative justice, and this begs the question, what is restorative justice? Briefly, restorative justice is a process or a way of looking at conflict. Its primary goal is to provide healing for those involved in conflict and can be victim-focused. Restorative justice strives to provide healing by addressing, among other things, the emotional needs of the grieved party. As well, in my study, I talk extensively about peer support groups. Here also it is important to define what this means. The peer support group is a type of restorative justice circle where people sit in a circle formation whenever practical and collectively discuss their common needs and concerns. The peer support group circle treats all in the group as equals and promotes speaking, although no one is compelled to speak, and listening, understanding, and encouragement. It is a place where healing occurs for the participants in a safe, respectful, non-judgmental, and empathetic environment. Finally, we have to state what the Gatehouse is. Briefly, the Gatehouse is a not-for-profit agency in Toronto that since 98 has provided emotional healing for adult male and female survivors of childhood sexual abuse. The major way it provides healing is by employing peer support groups. It runs a 15-week phase 1 group program with separate groups for males and females. It also runs a 16-week coeducational phase 2 program. This is for 16 weeks. And finally, it runs a phase 3 group program, which is also coeducational. In my study, I address the phase 1 program for men and women at the Gatehouse. This brings me to the pith and substance of my research article. And as I mentioned earlier, and to refresh your memory, the two key research questions that I address are: 1, what factors are needed for healing to occur in a restorative peer support group for adult survivors of childhood sexual trauma or abuse? And secondly, is the Gatehouse Phase 1 restorative peer support group program effective in providing these factors and therefore effective in providing healing for adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse? Based on the interviews of the survivors and group facilitators at the Gatehouse and my observations as a group facilitator myself, the most frequently mentioned and most highlighted factor deemed necessary to bring about meaningful healing for survivors in the group is addressing the major emotional needs or values of the survivors. In this regard, the following emotional needs were highlighted by the interviewees: a need for 1, emotional safety; 2, empathy; 3, trust; 4, to feel connected to other human beings; and 5thly, to find their voice. Looking first at the need for emotional safety. Survivors need an emotionally safe place in order to heal from childhood sexual abuse. Empirical research data strongly supports this proposition. A safe place means a welcoming, non-judgmental, and supportive environment. Safety in the group starts with the Gatehouse Phase 1 group house rules. Also, the focus in group is on the healing journey of each group member and is not confrontational, but supportive. As well, with empathy from group facilitators and group members, trust and connections between participants become stronger, and this contributes to a safe environment. This brings us to the question: do survivors feel emotionally safe in the Gatehouse peer support group? The degree of emotional safety felt by survivors is reflected in the Gatehouse survey questionnaire responses by the group participants. When presented with a statement, quote, "The house and the atmosphere is welcoming and warm," end of quote, 85% responded strongly agree, and 12% responded agree. Also, when asked to respond to the statement, quote, "I enjoyed coming to the group," close quote, 76% responded strongly agree, and 21% responded agree. Based on the Gatehouse survey, it is clear that the vast majority of survivors felt emotionally safe in the group. Looking now at the need to feel empathy from other human beings. In addition to the comments made by the Gatehouse survivors and group facilitators, research supports the proposition that survivors need to feel empathy in order to heal. Research shows that feeling empathy is an integral part of the survivor's healing process. Empathy creates a greater sense of connectedness and more harmonious relationships. In an empathic environment, survivors feel safer and are more likely to share their personal life stories with others in the group. To be empathetic is to virtually put yourself in the survivor's situation. It requires respect, sensitivity, caring, compassion, and even love sometimes. Also a non-judgmental attitude and patience from the facilitator and the group members. Regarding the effectiveness of the Gatehouse support group in providing a place where the survivor can feel empathy, the survey results are telling. When group participants were presented with the statement, quote, "I experienced more feelings of love and care in the group," 35% responded, "strongly agree," and 42% responded, "agreeing." The survey strongly supports the view that survivors feel more empathy by participating in the group. Thirdly, let's look now at the need to trust others as part of the healing journey. In addition to the comments made by survivors and facilitators, research also supports the proposition that survivors need to trust others in order to heal. That is vital, since trust is what the survivor had violently shattered by the perpetrator during the childhood sexual abuse. It is noteworthy that the perpetrator is often someone the victim knows. To trust someone means that you feel you can rely on them and you are comfortable
It looks like we lost Stefan on the internet connection. We're going to try and get Stefan back. I'm going to end the broadcast and come back in.